Hey there friends, this is Frugal Green Girl again, and I just wanted to talk to you really quick today about how to make dill pickles. If you've never done canning before, pickling is probably one of the easiest ways that you can get into the world of canning. You don't need any special supplies or anything like that. All you need is a hot water bath, which can be done in just a regular soup or stock pot, and some canning jars. And so it's super easy to do. And the recipe that I have that I want to share with you today, I really love because you can do exactly how many cucumbers you have. When I was first looking for a recipe to make pickles, it seemed like every recipe I came across called for, 4 or 5 or 8 or 10 pounds of cucumbers in order to be able to make them. And if I only have like 4 or 5 actual cucumbers, and I'm not even sure how many pounds that really is, because I grew them, it's not like I bought them from a grocery store to be able to measure to know exactly how many pounds that really is. I really felt like the recipes didn't really work for me being a home gardener, growing the pickling cucumbers myself. So when I came across this recipe, I really enjoyed it. There were a few things I changed, and I'll explain why, but I will add that in the recipe so that you can kind of choose. And the other thing I really like about it is that there's so many different options. A lot of recipes say, this is for making whole pickles, or it's, mainly for slicers or spears or whatever, and there's no extra, different recipe for making like relish or anything like that. But this is totally gives you a whole lot of options. You can really do whatever it is you want to do with that. You can make them traditional, you can make them garlicky, you can make them spicy, and it really doesn't change much in the recipe. You could just use the optional ingredients or not. So I really do enjoy it, and I really hope that you try it. And all of the recipes are posted below, and there's different recipes, but they're basically the same for either a half pint, a pint, or a quart size jar. And make sure when you are going through the recipe that you're getting the right size jar. A quart jar is a really fairly large size jar. It's, like about 2 hands tall or something like that. It's fairly large. This one is a lot smaller. This is called a pint, and this one is a half pint. So make sure, when you're following the recipe, you're not using the wrong size jar with the different, the recipe for a larger size jar and a smaller one. I did that once and I ended up with some really vinegary pickles, because oftentimes the jars don't really say what size they are, so do be aware of that. And some of the things in the recipe, you can either use one thing or another, but since the recipe is posted below, I'd rather not spend my time in the video explaining to you the recipe. You can just get it from down there. I'd rather go over how to can them and the reasoning for the ingredients that go in the pickles. The first ingredient you'll see on that list is grape leaves. Now this may sound like one that doesn't seem necessary, but it kind of is. A lot of other pickling recipes will have an ingredient called alum, or alum, depending on how you want to pronounce it. It's a type of aluminum, and personally I don't feel like it's safe to consume aluminum. I think that there's a lot of research that's been done that says aluminum consumption has been linked to a lot of neurological diseases, Alzheimer's disease, Lou Gehrig's disease, these types of things. And so if they have a limit that say, okay, if you eat more than this it's unhealthy, but under this it's okay, then none is even better, right? Well, that's kind of like what I would prefer. So instead of adding it to my pickles, or another option that you would have in place of this would be calcium chloride. All 3 of these things, alum or pickle fresh, calcium chloride, and grape leaves, are all going to help kill the enzymes in the cucumbers that cause your pickles to get soggy and actually go bad. So whichever one you do choose, it is a necessary ingredient, and so don't just skip over it. Calcium chloride, the second one I listed, it's also known as pool shock. They use it in that, and they also use it in road de-icer. I did do some research on that one, and again, I didn't want that one in my pickles either, so that's why I chose to use the grape leaves. I really do think it works well, and I just picked some out of my backyard. But if you don't have either of those and you would like to try one of the other ones, feel free to do that as well. The second ingredient would be garlic. Dill pickles aren't, dill pickles without garlic, but you can add a little bit more or a little less depending on your tastes. Dill seed and dill weed. I know that seems kind of weird to have both, but these are dill pickles after all, so you know, having the two in there really make a nice dill flavor for the pickles. And if you don't have fresh, feel free to use just dill weed, you know, just the dried spice that you get from your grocery store or whatnot. I prefer the fresh, but you know, they both taste good. So if you don't have any fresh or whatnot, feel free to use the dry. Salt. Salt is important. If you're going to use pickling salt, that's fine. You can also use a coarse kosher salt. The thing about the salt is that you just can't use an iodized salt. If you use iodized salt in this recipe, it'll cause your pickles to turn brown and they won't look very appetizing. So whatever salt you use, pickling salt and coarse kosher salt are basically exactly the same, except pickling salt is more finely ground, and coarse kosher salt, excuse me, bit of a tongue tie there. It has, you know, a more coarse type of texture to it, but they both work exactly the same. So whatever you have, use that. White vinegar. Whatever vinegar you choose, make sure it's a 5% acidity. I choose an organic vinegar because we don't eat GMOs here, and so I use an organic vinegar, and out of the organic vinegars there's a raw unfiltered, and it doesn't say what its acidity is, and then there's another type that says it's regular white vinegar that has a 5% acidity. I wouldn't use the raw unfiltered vinegar for this recipe. I would make sure to use the one that says 5% acidity, because the pickling brine between the salt and the vinegar would actually cause these to not go bad and spoil. It's kind of like the preservative, so make sure that you're using the right one with the 5% acidity on that. And then there's some other optional ingredients, peppercorns and red pepper flakes and things like that. Those will all just make your pickles spicy, so it just depends on whether or not you want spicy pickles. So the first thing you would do is wash and sterilize your canning jars. Make sure that they're really well cleaned. And then the next thing you would want to do is put the grape leaf, if you're using the grape leaf, in the bottom of the jar. You'll see it in all of the bottoms of my jars. I got a big grape leaf down here. And I just think it looks better in the bottom of the jar. It doesn't matter if it's on the side or if it's on the bottom of the jar, just as long as it's in there. And it doesn't really matter what type of pickles you're making, whether you're making baby dills or if you're making spears, hamburger type chips, or some relish or whatever. All of them do need this ingredient. And then after you've put that in the bottom of the jar, I would go ahead and add the rest of your spices in the bottom of the jar next. And then add the cucumbers, whatever type of cucumbers you want. Again, you have tons of options here. Any kind of cucumbers you want to put in, whole slices, whatever. Pack the jar in to about the I don't know, this nub here, the bottom of where the ring band sits. Pack your cucumbers into about there, no further. And you can get them in there fairly tight, but don't bruise the fruit as you're trying to squish them in the jar. This can make the pickles, again, too soft. And then add the vinegar last. And then after you've added the vinegar, basically you just take hot water next. I just use water from my tea kettle. And then fill it all the way up to about 1/4 of an inch from the top. And then after you're finished with that, you know, canning jars have these 2-part lids. Make sure that this is in some hot water. You can either dip it in the hot water from the hot water bath, or you can have a separate pan with it in there. You know, wipe the top lid ring so that none of the spices or anything prevent a good seal. So wipe that off with like a clean paper towel or something like that. Put the lid thing on the top, and then put the ring on top of that, and then tighten it really tight, and then step away and then tighten it again because you really want these to be really nice and tight. Otherwise the liquid will evaporate out of here and then you'll end up with too little bit of liquid. So don't break it or anything, but just do make sure it's really good and tight. And the next thing you're going to want to do after you've filled this with hot water is to stick it in a hot water bath. When you stick it in the hot water bath, you need to make sure that it has exactly, or you know, no less than 1 inch. So I just made all of these pickles the other day, all in one hot water bath. So it's okay if, you know, the water was up to here and it's way lower than this one. That's okay, as long as every single jar is covered with no less than 1 inch of water. And then the processing times for each of the jars are different. These are 8, this one's 10, this one's 12 minutes. These are actually really crucial. If you put these in the hot water bath and they're not all the way boiling yet, or if when you put these in the water isn't, you know, it stops boiling because of the cool jars, which again, you don't want it to be too different here, the temperatures. That's why we add the hot water, so it can kind of like start pre-cooking or get it up to the temperature. When you put it in the hot water bath, make sure that it comes to a full rolling boil before you start counting it as the processing time. If it takes 3-5 minutes before it really starts the full rolling boil, don't count that in there. Start the 10 minutes or the 12 or the 8 or whatever it is for the different size jars from the time it comes to that full rolling boil. This is really important. If you don't get the temperature inside of the jar high enough, it might not kill anything that's not, you know, good, anything negative that could potentially be in there, some bacteria or whatever, and cause the food to spoil. So make sure, you know, you're really careful about this and that it's, you know, cooked at the right temperature and you process it for the correct time. If you cook it for too long, however, the pickles will become soft and, you know, not as yummy. So do be careful and make sure you set a timer or watch the time. But other than that, I mean, it's pretty easy to do. I made a couple of jars this size earlier in the season. I had 4 cucumbers, and so I made 2, you know, hamburger slices this size, and so now I have obviously a whole lot more cucumbers that I was able to do here, but the recipe made it so it was really easy to do, whether I have tons of jars or just a few. That's why I prefer this recipe over others, because you can, you know, pickle exactly how many cucumbers you have. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask, and I really hope that you found this video helpful. And I really hope you make some yummy dill pickles, because these are way better than the ones you get in the store. And if you make them yourself and you're omitting a lot of the, you know, preservatives and other types of chemicals they add to those ones, these are healthier too. So happy pickling, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.